You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku Enters DanMachi. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of ArgonautStrike on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Izuku shot the beam of white toward the light blue-haired man who dodged easily. He couldn't move, he was stuck like a deer in headlights. Fear built up as the man got closer and closer to him before his hand extended out for his face. At that moment the man's hand had wrapped itself around his face, disintegrating it in an instant. Izuku felt nothing as his entire body then crumbled to dust. Izuku shot up screaming in fear. He looked around and noticed he was in his bed. Another one, they're getting worse. Izuku thought as he got out of bed. Stretching his legs he looked over to the time and noticed it was 4 in the morning. It was the first day back to UA after the longer weekend due to what happened. He wasn't getting any more sleep. He got up to go eat something for breakfast. Just picking something out of the fridge he ate it faster than he normally would. Now it was 4:30 a.m., he still had 3.5 hours before school. He thought of something to do and decided to do it. Writing the note he left it on the table as he put on his gym clothes and put his uniform in his bag and left. It wasn't the first time he had left in the early morning hours for some training. Heading over to UA to train his quirk he found himself heading toward Gym Gamma. He walked in and placed his bag down and made his way to the middle of the room and began working out, doing push-ups and sit-ups and jogging around the entire building. After about 30 minutes of light training, he walked over to near the rock pillars from the other day. He began shooting flames at the pillars. Whoa, give that pillar a break. Izuku's head shot behind him at the sound of the familiar voice. His eyes met someone that was missing his Scara. Togata. The one and only. He laughed. What are you doing here? I'm here for some early morning training. He shouted while striking a pose. I saw the light of the flames and thought I should say hi, 'cause you know not many people here at this time and all. Well, since we're here, wanna train together? I'm still not gonna fight you. Izuku deadpanned. Damn it. But I guess training is fine. As the two teens stood at other ends of the training area, facing off one another. When I walked in on him and the other members of the Big Three training, he seemed to holding his own very well as they looked more roughed up than he did. This won't be easy. Izuku raised his right hand and shouted, Firebolt. The flame shot toward him but seemingly passed right through him. Togata ran up toward Izuku. As the teen jumped back to put more distance, he shot another firebolt at the approaching teen. Only for the man to then fall into the ground. Izuku looked around confused by what had just happened. Then suddenly he was slapped on the head from behind. He turned and he wasn't there anymore. Bang! Another slap landed, but yet again he couldn't counterattack. Again and again and again. More and more slaps landed and Izuku couldn't do anything to stop it. He moved a distance away from where he was before and closed his eyes. He couldn't see the man. He focused not on his power, not on himself. Then he felt at the moment Togata popped out of the ground. He felt his eyes on him. Izuku turned around and slammed his hand onto Togata's chest and shot a firebolt into it. The strike caught Togata off guard, so he was blasted away by the flames. That quickly. DMN, this kid is good, not even some villains catch on to that as fast as he did. Your win. Togata said while admitting defeat. Huh. I just touched you. And that's fantastic, I can't wait to see how far you go. he said before picking up his clothes and walking out. Siwei. Izuku looked at the door for a few seconds before continuing his workout. The start of school rolled around, and when Izuku walked into class he got a lot of weird looks. "Hey Midoriya, I heard you beat one of the big three," Kirishima said proudly. "Huh? Are you talking about Togata?" "Yeah. All I did was touch him. And apparently that's all you need to do. Is it really that strong to just touch him?" "Yep. Though nobody told me why." The door slid open as a mummified Aizawa walked in. "Sit down." But Izuku and Kirishima were already sitting. "Good," he said as he walked up to the podium. "Aizawa, shouldn't you be resting?" Azui asked, concerned for her teacher. "I'm fine, but thank you," Aizawa's muffled voice said. Now on to the two topics of today's homeroom. The UA Sports Festival will be held in 2 weeks, therefore use that time as best you can to prepare for it. A certain pressure filled the room as Aizawa talked about it. "What's the next topic, sir?" Ida asked. "Thank you for asking." Aizawa then turned toward Izuku. "Principal Nizu wants to talk with you, Midoriya." All eyes shifted toward the young teen. Izuku got up and walked toward the door. "What did I do? Why would he want to talk to me of all people? Was this Togata's fault?" These thoughts passed through his head as he walked to the office. And before he knew what had happened he was face to face with the giant wooden doors that led to the office. He knocked twice. "Come in." Izuku slowly opened the door to see Principal Nizu on top of his desk with a man Izuku didn't know to his right and All Might on the left. He closed the door as he walked in. "Ah, just who I wanted to see. Midoriya, meet Detective Tsukachi." Both bowed at each other. After they raised their heads the three men then bowed for Izuku. "Thank you for helping as many people as you could at the USJ," the animal man said. It was no problem after all. If I want to be a great hero, saving people is the job." He was met with a massive smile coming off the principal. "I would expect no less of my students. You may return to class now." Izuku walked out and made his way back to class. Lunchtime rolled around rather fast. "Oh, I've been meaning to ask. Why do you two want to become heroes?" Yaoyorozu asked Izuku and Uraraka. Izuku looked a bit surprised but decided to share it with the group. "Well, I want to be a hero to help people. If I can make someone smile then I'm quite okay with that." "Quite the goal," Yaoyorozu said, rather proud of the green bean. "What about you, Uraraka?" Yaoyorozu followed up. The brunette girl began scratching the back of her head. "It's for the money." Uraraka then explained in full why. "Oh, so it's for your parents?" "Yeah." Izuku then turned to face Yaoyorozu. "What about you?" She looked down for a second before she began speaking. "Well, it's no secret my parents are wealthy, but because of this, they've always had such high expectations of me. They both started from the bottom and built their way to where they are now. And so all my life they wanted me to take over the company, but when I told them I wanted to be a hero it was like all that pressure to take the company vanished. Oh dear, I haven't told that to anyone." She giggled. "So she has an inferiority complex," Izuku thought. "Like I used to." Meanwhile in the cafeteria, a certain half-and-half student was waiting in line to get food when he overheard a certain conversion. "Did you hear about that first year that beat a member of the Big Three?" "Oh, I heard about it. I saw him walking around with Midnight during lunch a few days ago." "Do you think he was getting special training?" "Probably. DMN kid's a filthy cheater." Todoroki was slightly surprised by this. He didn't know Midoriya that well, but he didn't seem the type to cheat. But these two weren't the only ones who felt that way. As class was ending for the day, Yaoyorozu opened the door and was caught off guard by the abundance of people standing outside. Yaoyorozu took a few steps back. What are they doing here? No idea. Uraraka said. Scouting out the competition. Bakugou said as he walked toward them. Izuku and everyone else watched as he calmly walked out of the room. Where the hell do you think you're going, huh? Tetsu shouted as he made his way into the crowd. Bakugou turned to face them slowly. Some weakling like you can't take my spot, so I have nothing to worry about. He said without even cracking a smile. Izuku saw him and realized something's changed within him. As class rep, he stepped up to try and quell their rage. He walked over to the front door and opened his mouth but was cut off by a shout. It's the guy who cheated against Togata. Every eye shifted toward him both from his class and from the crowd. Huh? Was Izuku could say. The students outside began shouting and berating Izuku. The students of 1A wanted to say something but couldn't muster up the courage. A few students took their own lack of courage much harder than others. The students were, Yaoyorozu, Uraraka, Azui, Hagakure, Jiro, Kaminari and Mineta. All the students Izuku saved at the USJ. And now he was under attack and they couldn't do anything to help. Izuku decided to speak up for himself. If you really think I cheated. Izuku's glare intensified as he stared up at them. Then watch me. With that, he walked out of the classroom and made his way over to Gym Gamma. While training, the door swung open to reveal two of the big three. Togata and Heido. I thought you would be here. Heido ran over and hugged him. I'm sorry, I didn't think this would happen. Izuku then realized that she was the one that told everyone what happened. It's okay, Izuku said while he backed away out of the hug. You didn't think this would happen, so it's not your fault. He said. I'm still sorry. She said while looking at the ground. So what are you gonna do now? Togata asked. I need to get stronger so I can win the sports festival. You want help? Heido asked. No, that will just make the rumors worse. I'll win this with my own power. They could see the determination in his eyes. We'll leave you to it then. Togata said with a smile. Izuku then started his workout. Izuku looked around and saw he was back at the USJ in the plaza, but for the first time, he was by himself. It was unsettling, something about it was ominous, every hair on his body was standing. Even though he was by himself, he could feel the eyes of people all around him. Then it intensified from behind. He didn't want to turn around, he was terrified by what he would see. What if he was there? That man, Shigaraki, had been haunting him ever since that day. Swallowing all his fear, Izuku turned around to face the myriad of eyes watching him. And was met with the worst sight he had ever seen. There, hanging from the ceiling, was all his classmates. Yaoyorozu was right in front of him with Uraraka and Bakugou just next to her. Their lifeless corpses hung on threads, mangled and partly turned to dust. There behind them all stood Shigaraki, smiling at him from behind his hand. Why didn't you save us? Yaoyorozu's body spoke to him. I did. He yelled at it. Then they all began screaming at him for not being able to save them or anyone else. Izuku stood there frozen with fear. I tried to help. Know your quirk, save people. Shigaraki finally spoke. You just hid behind it like the weakling you are. Izuku had the urge to vomit, he was going to. Until he shot up. Once again he had awoken in his bed, sweat pouring down his face as the urge to vomit was still fresh in his mind. He looked at his clock and saw it was 6 a.m. The sports festival starts in a few hours. I should probably get ready to go. He got out of bed and quickly made his way to the shower, hoping his mum hadn't seen him. As he felt the water clean away all the sweat from around him, he had an urge he hadn't had since before starting UA. The dreams were getting worse, and back before UA, when the nightmares got this bad, there was only one thing he could do to quell them. Reaching out of the shower and into the cupboard with all the towels and sink pipes. He placed his hand around the back of one of the pipes, he pulled it out. A sharp and clean razor blade. He looked at it and was reminded of his past. He placed it up against his upper right arm and saw the rest of the scars. They were faded to the point if you weren't looking for them you wouldn't be able to find them. He applied some pressure and felt the blade slowly sink into him. The pain bringing some form of relief. But it wasn't enough, he pushed again and again in a bloody mess of cuts. But stopped as he heard a knock on the bathroom door. "Izuku dear, you need to hurry or you'll be late for school." His mother's voice broke him out of the trance he was in. Quickly he got out of the shower and dried himself off, then wrapped some bandages around the wounds. He then put on his school uniform and cleaned the now bloody razor before placing it in his pocket. After eating breakfast he made his way to school and bumped into Yaoyorozu, like actually bumped into her. When he did, the blade fell from his pocket. His heart stopped. She was looking at it. Staring. Quickly Izuku picked it up, placed it back in his pocket and ran. "Midoriya. Wait!" She shouted, but Izuku was gone. Yaoyorozu now had a lot of questions, but because Izuku ran away she couldn't get any answers. Well, now Izuku had a lot to dread. First, there was the sports festival. Second, the dreams. And third, the talk with Yaoyorozu that was definitely going to happen. He just didn't know when. And the fourth problem was about to rear its ugly head. They were in a back room waiting for the event to start. Izuku was keeping his distance from Yaoyorozu. Yaoyorozu on the other hand couldn't keep her eyes off the teen. Midoriya. All eyes in the room turned to see Todoroki call out to Izuku. "Yeah, what's up Todoroki?" After a minute of just staring at each other. "I'm gonna beat you." Izuku was slightly taken aback by this. He regained his composure and turned around to face the rest of the class. "I'd like to see you try." Todoroki was about to say something before a bell went off telling them all to head outside. The class walked out and went toward the arena. As the first event was about to begin, Izuku turned to Uraraka. "Uraraka, use your quirk on you and me." "Why?" "The first obstacle is the doorway." She looked at the doorway and then quickly realized why that was going to be a problem. She then extended her hand out toward the verdant teen. He took her hand and began floating into the air. Uraraka extended her hand to someone else. The person in question took it and went with the two. "Start." As those words were said, the students began pouring in. Izuku and Uraraka were in the air and needed momentum. "Firebolt." Izuku yelled, shooting the three teens forward. He blasted their way right through the whole doorway. And the first to pass through the door is Izuku Midoriya, Ochako Uraraka, and Momo Yaoyorozu. Izuku turned around at the announcement and saw Yaoyorozu floating along with them. "Midoriya. Throw us." Uraraka yelled for the third time. Doing what he was told, he flung them. "Sorry." Yaoyorozu shot forward and created 3 pillows for them to land on. Release. The 3 then began to fall back down to earth. Each one landed on a pillow to soften the blow. Yaoyorozu from her place at the front turned around to face Izuku. "Midoriya, we need to ta-dash," she was interrupted by Izuku's flames shooting toward her. She covered her face expecting to be hit with the heat for a few seconds but didn't feel any kind of impact. She opened her eyes to look and saw Izuku right next to her running past her. "Watch your surroundings more," he said, shooting right past her. She turned around to shout at him but saw a robot with a hole in its center lying down just behind her. Izuku didn't have long to get as far ahead as he could. Todoroki wasn't far behind him and Bakugou was catching up slowly but surely. But the unexpected happened. A robot got the jump on him. The thing was going to hit him even if he used Firebolt. Then out of nowhere came a red-haired guy wielding a great sword. SWNGNG down the weapon on the robot, destroying it in one go. The guy then turned to Izuku. "Sorry about that, you just looked like you needed some help," the guy said with a hearty laugh. "Thank you for the help." It was no problem. Izuku looked at the guy. Why the hell does he have a sword? Izuku opened his mouth to ask the question but got cut off by a pink blur. There shooting past the two was a pink-haired girl hovering her way down past all the robots. Damn it, may wait up for me. He shouted, giving chase to the pink-haired girl. Izuku watched as the man ran away. Izuku remembered where he was and took off dodging and weaving his way through the robots. He felt eyes filled with hatred coming closer from behind him. He turned around to see Bakugou right behind his right hand held out. An explosion roared out from where the two teens were. Everyone in the area turned to face it and saw a massive cloud of dust. As the dust settled, they saw Izuku with his right hand against Bakugou's stomach. Firebolt. The flames shot the teen away from Izuku. Using his chance, Izuku began running to catch back up to the front. As he arrived, he saw the second obstacle. A massive pit with pillars sticking out. He stood looking at it, unaware of how the hell he was going to pass this. He watched as his frog-like classmate jump into the middle of one of the lines. He decided he had enough waiting. He took a few steps back and jumped. His classmates watching frozen in shock at what the teen had just done. As he was in the air, he focused on the flames. I can change their shape or move them according to my will, therefore. Firebolt. He yelled as the electric flames shot down into the pit as the force of the flames blasted him upwards. What the hell? Asked Yaoyorozu, who had just witnessed this. He's using his flames like. The hell do you think you're doing, Sparkles? Using my moves like that? Bakugou yelled as he shot toward the teen. But his attention quickly switched when he noticed Todoroki was almost done with the pit obstacle. This is not the end of this conversation, Sparkles. Izuku just kept doing what he was doing. He kept running and trying to catch up to the front but got stuck. The third and last obstacle was a minefield. Bakugou and Todoroki were ahead of him, but not by much. But at the speed he was going, he wasn't going to catch up to them. But then an idea popped into his head. He raised his right hand toward the two teens. Firebolt. The sound of Izuku yelling made both teens turn to look at him. The flames were shooting toward them. They both dodged. Ha, you really think you can hit me with those shitty flames? Who said they were aiming for you? Both teens turned to look at the flames and saw them shoot toward the ground right in front of them. The explosion blasted both teens back. Izuku took a step forward on top of one of the mines. He was on the front side, so when the explosion went off, Izuku was blasted forward, passing both of his classmates. They both landed and shot back to catch up. As they were about to pass him, another explosion went off right in front of them. Izuku had done it again, using the explosion to blast himself forward and them backwards. With that, Izuku had passed the entire minefield in only 2 steps. Everyone watching was taken aback, but a lot of UA students were still sure he was cheating. Izuku booked it for the finish line. As the 3 teens ran into the exit gate, all cameras lost them. The audience was waiting, and waiting, and waiting. This anticipation is killing me. Present mic boomed out. As those words were said, a mop of green hair shot out from the tunnel, quickly followed with the half-and-half student right behind him, and just behind him was the explosive blonde. And Izukumidoriya comes in first place. Midnight shouted. While there were cheers, Izuku could hear, feel the rage coming off the other students watching him from the stand. However, there was another set of eyes on him. One that sent a chill down his spine. However, he was broken out of that fear by midnight. Well, now that 42 students have passed, let's get the event started. Izuku looked around and saw Yaoyorozu, Uraraka, and the red-haired guy had passed. Well, next event up is the cavalry battle. Here are the rules. You will form a team of 2 to 4 players and try to steal other teams' headbands. The number of points will be chosen for each player based on where they ranked in the obstacle race. The person at the bottom will be worth 5 points, the person at 41st will be worth 10, so 4 and so on, but the one who this rule doesn't apply to is the person in first. They will be worth 10 million. Izuku felt it as the eyes of everyone around him turned to look at him like how a predator looks at its prey. You will have 15 minutes to form a team, your time starts now. Izuku began looking around for someone to join his team. He walked towards Shiro, but Shiro immediately left the area. This happened a few more times with other classmates. It was hopeless, nobody wanted to work with him. At least he thought that was the case. Hey, buddy. The red-haired guy that helped him before yelled at Izuku. Remember how I helped you? How about you repay that favor and let me team with you? He looked around and sighed. Yeah, okay, I don't really have a choice here. Izuku said that last bit under his breath. What was that? Nothing. Izuku began looking around. He needed 2 more people to team with him. And saw 2 people that just so happened to be alone. As the bell went for signifying the end of the 15 minutes to form a team. I'm disappointed in you 2 for teaming with the enemy. Nito Monoma said with his 2 classmates. Itsuka Kendo and Ibara Shiozaki turned to face their arrogant classmate. He offered us after you guys turned us down. Maybe you're the enemy. The 2 girls said with a bite in their tongue. Izuku, Kendo, Ibara and the red-haired guy walked over to their starting points. Oh yeah, I completely forgot to introduce myself. The man laughed. The name's Welf Kratso. Nice to meet Cha. Welf said with a smile. It's nice to meet you Kraz dash. Izuku was cut off by Welf. Nope, just call me Welf. Alright, well Welf, it's nice to meet you, I'm Izuku. Midoriya. Izuku smiled at the guy. But you can just call me Izuku. What about you 2 fine ladies? Welf said with a wide grin covering his face. Itsuka looked at him and sighed. I'm Itsuka Kendo. Shiozaki on the other hand glared at him. My name is Ibara Shiozaki. Alright, what's the plan? All eyes turned to Izuku. He gathered them so they assumed he had some kind of plan in mind. Alright, I'm gonna need a rundown on all your quirks. They all looked at each other, nobody really wanting to speak up first. My quirk is Big Fist. I can increase the size of my fists, which in turn increases my strength. My quirk is Vine. My hair is made of vines that I can control. With these, I can capture, attack and even defend as I can detach them from my head. Shiozaki explained. All the eyes shifted to Welf, who stood there. He looked around for a second before slumping down slightly. He let out a breath before looking up and speaking. My quirk is called Kratso BLD. It allows me to add elemental power into weapons or things I create, he said as he pulled out an orb from a pouch that sat on his right thigh. The orb was a dark red color. I also have quite good fire resistance due to my mum's quirk. The other 3 were sat wide-eyed at the taller teen. Your quirk is insane. Izuku said what they were all thinking. He looked somewhat annoyed at the praise but went along with it anyway. Thank you. Alright, so here's the plan. As the alarm rang out meaning the beginning of the cavalry battle, Izuku's team was prepared for anything. Alright, so here's the plan. Izuku began his explanation. I'll be the rider as I need my hands to use firebolt, so it would be safer for everyone else if I was there. Welf will be the frontman. Welf gave a smile at everyone. He has fire resistance so he won't get burned by my quirk. Shiozaki, I want you on the left side defending. Why the left side? Kendo asked. I'll be using my right hand for firebolt, so having her on the left makes using it a lot safer for her vines. Izuku explained, to which Kendo nodded her head and made a sound. So that leaves the right side to me then? Kendo asked. Izuku nodded. Instantly Bakugou's group began rushing toward them, a feeling of rage permeating the entire arena. Izuku raised his right hand and shot the almost lightning-like flames toward his childhood friend, but just before they arrived the flames shot downward and hit Kirishima, who didn't have enough time to use his quirk. 2 more teams appear from seemingly nowhere. That's Tetsu. His quirk is steel, he can turn his body into steel. Kendo shouted up toward Izuku. Izuku nodded and took in the information and then acted in the best way he could think of. Welf, hand me an air orb. On it. Welf said as he reached into his pouch and pulled out a light green orb and tossed it up to Izuku, with Shoji on one side, Tetsu on the other and Bakugou's team in the front. The best option is to go up. Shiozaki formation air. Izuku shouted as he threw the orb toward the ground, using it to shoot his entire team into the air. Once they made it to the sky above the rest of the students, Shiozaki shot a few vines toward the ground that buried themselves in the ground, using them to suspend the team in the air. Everyone looked up shocked by the last-minute form change. Izuku took this time to move away and out of the bad situation they were in. They landed a bit away from the problem teams and had a few seconds of calmness. Alright, Welf, what orbs do we have left? 2 fires, 1 air, 2 ice and 2 lightning. Before Izuku got to make a plan, Kendo's big fist appeared next to him and blocked an attack. As her hand fell back down, Izuku saw a blackbird retreating back to its owner. Izuku shot his flames toward it and managed to make the monster go back to its host. Well, full charge ahead, we need to get away from that team. Following his orders, Welf began to run but was stopped by a wall of ice forcing its way in front of them. And where do you think you're going? The cold voice of Todoroki shot its way toward them. His team consisted of him as the rider, Ida as the front, Kaminari as the right and Yaoyorozu as the left. I'll be taking that headband. Izuku noticed Kaminari began sparking. Shiozaki vine ball, now. Izuku shouted as she wrapped the entire team in vines. The electricity hit the vine and stopped without getting through. Now formation break. Izuku shouted as from one side of the vines Kendo ran out, her hand massive and seemingly holding something. Shiozaki with her vines still kept up in a ball began running the other way, and Welf pulled out his great sword and began charging headfirst at Ida. What a play from Team Midoriya. Team Todoroki has no idea which person to go for. Midnight shouted. Welf made a beeline for Ida, so Todoroki shot ice down to defend his teammate. But Welf quickly turned on his feet and began swngng toward Yaoyorozu. She created a shield to defend herself from the attack. Welf, when we break, go after Yaoyorozu. The more she uses her quirk, the less she can in the long run. Izuku's words played over in his head as he swung again and again, making her make more shields. Todoroki shot him away with ice and turned toward Shiozaki and began shooting ice toward her. Welf reached into his pouch and pulled out a red orb and threw it at the ice, managing to stop it before it reached her. He's in that one, Ida, full charge. Todoroki shouted as his entire team turned toward that direction. Hold on tight. Ida said as blue flames began raging out of his engines. Repicro burst. Ida shouted as he shot forward faster than anyone had ever seen him go. He blasted his way right through the ball of vines and saw nothing. Not even Shiozaki was there. Formation assemble. Izuku shouted from within Kendo's fist as Welf had finished making his way back and Shiozaki was in the air on her way. The team went back to their full glory. Todoroki raised his right hand and was about to shoot ice at them but was stopped when Izuku's flames began flying toward them. Without thinking, he raised his left hand and shot flames back at him, both the flames meeting in the air and canceling each other out. Rage began filling him. Ida, go for them again, we are going to win this. I can't. Todoroki looked at him and saw smoke puffing out of his engine. My engine stalled. Ida began running like a normal person. Just as they were about to reach Izuku's team, the ice exploded and in came the loud-mouthed member of Class 1A. As the three teams were about to clash, the bell went off, signifying the end of the cavalry battle. And that's a wrap, folks. Present Mike shouted. I'll leave it up to Midnight to announce the winners. In first place, we have Team Midoriya. She shouted as Izuku and the rest of his team let out a long and needed sigh. In second place, Team Bakugou. In third place, Team Todoroki. And in fourth place, Team Shinso. Everyone turned their heads to see a tired-looking purple-haired guy with a smile on his face. Standing behind him was a dazed-looking Uraraka, a pink-haired girl that Welf seemed to know as Hatsum and Tokoyami. "Alright everyone, it's time for a break. After the break we'll be starting the battle tournament," Midnight said to the students. Izuku was about to walk away with his team but a hand grabbing onto his wrist stopped him. He turned around and saw Yaoyorozu standing there, a fire in her eyes. "We need to talk." Izuku felt a pit form in his stomach at those words. He knew what she wanted to talk about. He nodded, thinking that he might as well get this over with as soon as possible. They began walking away and into one of the tunnels. A certain ashen blonde teen saw this. They stopped walking as they reached an exit to a tunnel leading to the outside. Everything felt slow to Izuku, a horrible feeling building up in his stomach. He stood face to face with the black-haired girl. "I want you to explain what I saw this morning. Why was there a razor in your pocket?" Izuku wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear from the world. He gulped before he even thought about opening his mouth. He looked up and was about to lie to her, but he saw the look in her eyes. She was actually worried about him and he could see that. "I used to self-harm," he admitted in a quiet voice, hoping she heard it. "So why did you have a razor today?" she asked rather calmly, her voice soft and light. "Ever since the USJ I've been having these nightmares. Back when I did, it was to stop the horrible dreams I was having, so I thought if I did it the nightmares would stop," he said. He felt like he was on the verge of tears, like if he relaxed even a bit he would break down right where he stood. He was afraid of how she would react, but to him the most unexpected thing happened. She hugged him. "It's okay, you can let it all out," she said. Hearing those words, Izuku broke down. The tears began flowing out of his eyes as he gripped tightly into her arms. He felt safer than he had his whole life. "You don't have to do that anymore, okay? I'm here for you." The two remained like that for the next 10 minutes. Before they made their way toward the cafeteria to eat something before the next round, both of them stuck close to each other the entire way. "It's time to show the pairings. I hope you're all ready," Midnight shouted as she pressed a button and the screen lit up with rankings. Izuku looked at the screen. Midoriya vs. Welf, Todoroki vs. Zero, Shiozaki vs. Kamnari, Ida vs. Hatsum, Ashido vs. Shinso, Tokoyami vs. Yaoyorozu, Kendo vs. Kirishima and Uraraka vs. Bakugou. Before he got the chance to even look for his opponent, he felt a hand hit him on the back. He turned around to see Welf standing there with a smile on his face. "I hope you don't go easy on me," he said in a cheerful tone. "I wouldn't dream of it." Izuku said, a smile on his face. Now that he dealt with the Yaoyorozu thing, he no longer felt sick. "Up first is Midoriya and Welf. Can I have you two come up to the stage please?" Midnight asked as the two teens made their way, each one giving the other a thumbs up. Yaoyorozu made her way into the stands, what happened earlier still weighing heavily on her soul. As she entered, she saw Bakugou and felt a heat rise within her, rage barely contained in her body. She wasn't an idiot. Everyone in class knew the two of them had history, nobody knew what though. But given what Izuku had told her and how Bakugou acts, it's not strong to piece together that he had something to do with the way Izuku was before UA, and it definitely wasn't positive. She took the seat behind Bakugou as Uraraka had sat there. "What did Sparkles tell you?" Bakugou turned his head and asked, giving her a side eye. She glared at him, her rage expanding with his words. This confirmed the fact Bakugou had something to do with his past, and she wasn't planning on letting him get away with it. She turned away from the teen and talked with Uraraka, ignoring what he had asked. He let a groan and turned back to face the front. "Alright, boys, here are the rules. Both of you fight fair. I don't want to see any hits below the belt. If you step out of the arena you're out. If the other fighter is unable to continue, you win. Now that's out of the way, each of you head to one end and I'll start it." Welf extended his hand out in a fist toward Izuku, a smile covering his entire face. Izuku gave a quick grin back before bumping fists with the taller teen. Midnight vividly shivered at the boy's show of sportsmanship. As Izuku made his way over to the other end of the arena, he saw a few students sitting in the stands booing at him and shouting that he's a cheater. He felt a horrible feeling rise up in his stomach as his vision flashed back to middle school, that feeling of pressure and hatred. He hated it. he reached his starting point and turned around to face Welf and saw his class behind him up in the stands. He saw Yaoyorozu and for some unknown reason felt light, like all the problems from before just disappeared. He smiled. Begin. Midnight shouted as the teens locked eyes, both of them still smiling. Welf unsheathed his great sword and held it in front of him, the tip of the blade pointed at Izuku. Izuku raised his right hand and shot fire at Welf. Welf used the flat of his blade to block the attack. Izuku began charging at his opponent. He shot more flames to cover his approach. Without a weapon, you can't hope to beat me, so why are you getting closer? Welf thought, confused by his enemy's action. He was a few meters from Welf as he raised his hand and was to shoot flames once more. Welf raised his blade and covered his face, expecting the heat to slam into his weapon, but it never came. He lowered his sword to see what happened, only to see Izuku's right foot kicking the blade right out of his hand. First, I'll make him think I'm going to try to win with my flames, then I'll use my foot to disarm him and use his sword against him. The only plan Izuku could think of in time to win against Welf's fire resistance. His foot above his head and his body almost hitting the ground, Izuku planted his left hand on the ground and used that to finish his backflip. He made his descent toward the ground. As soon as his right foot touched the ground, he shot up and grabbed Welf's blade. He landed right in front of him with the blade pointed toward Welf's head. I win, was all Izuku said, having disarmed his opponent. Welf is unable to continue. VERYYYY Midnight was cut off as Welf slapped the sword. Everyone looked down, confused by what Welf had just done, until ice shot out from where his hand had landed and begun traveling its way up the blade and consumed Izuku. What a twist! Did Welf just turn this entire fight around? Present Mike shouted from next to the mummified Aizawa. These kids are going to any lengths to win this, as Aizawa said that the ice took on an orange hue. I wouldn't rule either of these kids out yet. As if following Aizawa's words, a flame shot out of the ice. I thought you hated using those? Izuku asked, having just broken out of the ice prison he was trapped in. Yeah, well, I couldn't win without them. Welf realized he just had to grit his teeth and get it over with. Glad to see you're not holding back anymore. Izuku chuckled, a big smile reforming on his face. Welf smiled as well, but not even a second later he threw a green orb at the ground between the two, pushing Izuku and him away from each other. Izuku still held on to the sword. He slammed it into the ground to stop him before he fell out of the arena. He still has at least one fire, he's out of air, one ice, and two lightning. I just gotta play this safe. Izuku thought, looking at Welf as he pulled another orb. Izuku couldn't see it, so he had no idea what it was. Welf and Izuku began charging at each other. Welf threw the orb at the ground. Izuku saw the color yellow and figured it had to lightning. He leapt into the air to dodge. The lightning spread out over the ground. He looked back at Welf and saw a red orb flying its way toward him. Izuku raised his right hand and shot flames out, detonating it in mid-air. The flames still shot forward and covered his entire body. I've done it, I win. Welf shouted from within his own mind, until he saw the green hair pop out of the smoke. SWNGNG, the blade on his right side. The blade got closer and closer to Welf before Izuku quickly turned it to the flat and it slammed into his side. Normally this wouldn't do much to the red-haired teen, but Izuku had managed to hit the pouch containing one lightning orb and one ice orb. The lightning and ice consumed him before he had a chance to react, and he fell to the ground, his body unable to move due to the shock. Welf Kratzo is unable to continue. The winner is Izukumidoriya. Midnight shouted once again, actually managing to finish her sentence this time. Izuku dropped the sword and lifted Welf up and propping him on his shoulder, before both teens made their way to the temporary nurse's office. Great job, I lost fair and square. Welf admitted. Hey, that was not an easy fight. You put up one of the best fights I've had to do. You should be proud. With your skills you could take on a few villains. Izuku joked. Welf weakly laughed. Izuku began making his way up toward the stands, hoping he didn't miss the start of the Todoroki vs. Zero fight. Begin. He heard Midnight announce the start of the fight as he pushed open the door and ran into the stands. As soon as he opened the door, though, he was met with a massive pillar of ice blocking the view. he took a few steps closer to the edge and saw the cold eyes of Todoroki looking up at the Class 1A stands. They made eye contact with each other, and he remembered Todoroki's words before the start of the festival. A nervous smile appeared over his face. This meant war. Izuku took a seat next to Yaoyorozu and began talking with her. He was glad their friendship was back to normal, but what was this feeling he had whenever he saw her, this warmth? He couldn't describe it. Her voice broke him out of his trance and he began blushing, though he didn't know why. Izuku and Yaoyorozu watched as Kaminari got his butt handed to him by Shiozaki. Izuku found it funny how the girl called Hatsum used Ida how to advertise her babies. But something about the way she called them her babies rubbed Izuku the wrong way. Izuku watched as Mina Ashido and the guy with purple hair whose name is apparently Shinso walk onto the stage, Shinso looking as tired as he did earlier, though now he was not smiling like he was when they all saw him after the second round. Begin. Midnight shouted once again. The purple-haired boy said something and then Mina shouted something, but then the entire arena fell silent. The boy said something again and then Mina began walking toward the edge and walked right off, causing her to lose instantly. Mina Ashido withdraws. Hitoshi Shinso moves on to the next round. Then Mina blinked her eyes and looked around, clearly confused by what had just happened. He walked past her and said something again, but nobody could hear what. As Mina walked back into one of the tunnels, Izuku heard some shouts. "Yeah, that's what you deserve, you subhuman beach." Someone shouted. Izuku looked in the direction of the guy. Do people not like Ashido? Why? He thought. Quirk discrimination was still a thing after all these years, but for someone to be so proud of what he was shouting, even when it hurts others, Izuku couldn't believe it. Next up was Yaoyorozu and Tokoyami. As Yaoyorozu walked onto the stage, she felt the pressure of all those eyes on her. Meanwhile, Tokoyami looked like he didn't care at all, which surprised her. Begin. Midnight yelled out once again right after she began, holding her throat, clearly being worn down by all the yelling. The dark shadow began rushing toward her, keeping rather low. She created a sword and a shield to defend, but then as the shadow got closer to her, a small item came out of her arm. She closed her eyes as the light of her quirk appeared at her ears. Everyone watched as a loud bang echoed through the whole stadium. With a bright light covering the arena, the shadow quickly rushed back to Tokoyami and re-entered his body. Using this time she had brought herself, Yaoyorozu rushed up and bashed Tokoyami with her shield, knocking him back. She placed the sword against his neck and he admitted defeat. Fumikage Tokoyami gives in. Momo Yaoyorozu moves on to the next round. And once again Izuku heard something about one of his classmates. Subhuman bird Mothaf got what he deserves. Ashido visibly flinched when the guy said this. Izuku was sick of this guy already. He got up from his seat and walked over to the barrier separating the class from the rest of the viewers and leapt over it. Looking around, he saw a bald guy with a black tattoo on his face shouting things at Tokoyami. Everyone watched as Izuku walked down to the guy and stood right behind him. "Say something about one of my classmates again," Izuku said in a low and threatening tone. The guy jumped out of his seat and turned around. "I dare you." The guy opened his mouth to speak but got cut off by a bark coming from the end of the row. Hound Dog was already coming over to sert the guy out. Izuku walked back to the barrier and jumped back in. "Thank you," Mina said from right in front of him. "It was no problem," was all he said before walking back to his seat. Yaoyorozu and Tokoyami appeared back at the stand. Yaoyorozu walked over and sat back in her normal seat as they all watched Kendo and Kirishima walk down and meet in the middle. Midnight started the match and the two ran at each other. Kendo slammed her fist into Kirishima, who didn't feel a thing but was pushed back at the force of the attack. Kendo kept throwing punches, every single one pushing him back more and more until he fell out of the ring, causing Kendo to win. She extending her hand to Kirishima, who took while crying about her being manly with something Izuku couldn't hear him but guessed, as that typically makes him cry. Izuku got up and made his way down to the waiting room for his fight against Todoroki. Izuku heard the start of the Uraraka vs Bakugou fight but had something else to deal with at that moment, as standing right in front of him was the number 3 hero Endeavor. Endeavor was staring right at the green-haired teen. Izuku took a step forward and walked past the man but was cut off. "You're going to fight my son next, right?" "Yeah, why?" Izuku said, not trusting anything this man had to say. "I want you to make him use his flames." Endeavor said, cutting to the chase right away. "Why should I?" Izuku asked, wondering what the big deal was. "So he can realize his full potential." "That doesn't sound like my problem," Izuku said before walking away and around the corner. Those were not the words Endeavor wanted to hear. As he was about to chase Izuku down and show him why he shouldn't disrespect his elders, he was cut off by a man with boar ears. "King," Endeavor said, looking at the man in front of him, the number 2 hero, King. Otter stood there staring at the flame hero for a second before speaking. "Lady Freya is interested in him." "Since when have I cared what Freya wants?" Endeavor said as he went to walk past him and catch up to Midoriya. "Therefore you will leave him alone." Otter wasn't around and Endeavor could tell this. He scoffed at the man before turning around and walking away. "Tell your Freya she can have him," was the last thing he said before walking away from the man. Izuku walked into the waiting room and saw on the screen the ending of Uraraka vs Bakugou. He closed the door and sat down, needing to come up with a way for him to win. He heard a knock come to the door and turned around to see who it was. He walked over and opened it. Yaoyorozu stood on the other side. He opened the door to let her come in as she walked in. "So do you have a plan yet?" "Kinda," Izuku said before continuing. As Izuku and Todoroki walked out and onto the stage, the teens shot each other looks of determination. Midnight saw these and shivered once again for like the 10th time that day, the fight you've all been looking forward to. The crowd roared at the two teens. "Begin!" Midnight shouted once again, all this shouting wearing down her throat. As she shouted, a barrage of ice shot its way toward Izuku. Quickly he moved to the left and dodged it before raising his right hand and shooting fire at the boy. Todoroki placed ice between him and Izuku. Izuku flames hitting the ice and melting it instantly. Izuku began running up to cut the distance. Ice shot out at him again, but he was in the middle of running toward Todoroki. He didn't have enough time to dodge. So he done the next best thing by aiming his right hand toward the ground and shot the flames that blasted him into the air, avoiding all the ice and making more progress to reach Todoroki. Todoroki saw this and leapt back, not allowing Izuku to even get remotely close to him. He covered the ground around in ice, making sure to keep Izuku away. However, that didn't stop Izuku for very long, as he just shot fire at the ice and continued his charge. "Todoroki, why don't you use your fire?" Izuku shouted as he rushed toward him. The two-tone teen looked at him with rage now filling his eyes. "Why the hell do you care? The old F-er put you up to that, huh? How much did he offer you?" Todoroki yelled out as he shot a whole glacier at Izuku. Izuku saw this coming, however, and raised his right hand and shot flames into it, covering where the ice was going to consume him. The arena fell silent as Izuku was devoured by the ice. A few seconds passed before Izuku burst from the ice and landed a punch on Todoroki's face. "Can't you see how strong everyone else is trying, and yet here you are only using half of your power because of a grudge?" Izuku shouted, trying to get through to the teen. "Shut up," with a lot of resistance. Todoroki covered his left hand in ice and punched Izuku back, knocking him farther back than when Izuku punched him. Izuku managed to land and face the teen. The two maintained eye contact for what felt like a few minutes before Izuku made the first move, this time, shooting fire at the teen. Todoroki once again erected an ice wall to block the attack. The fire melted through the ice and Todoroki saw through it. Izuku was gone, nowhere to be seen. Todoroki looked around for him, but then felt an impact in his side. Izuku had punched him in the gut. He hid behind the ice I made earlier. Izuku, not giving his opponent a chance to recover, punched him again in the face. This time, BLD shot out of his mouth. Todoroki touched the ground with his foot and shot ice up that consumed Izuku in a way very similar to when he used it against Zero. Izuku was unable to move. Izukumidoriya is unable to co-dash. Midnight was once again cut off by a blast of fire raging out of the ice. Without giving Todoroki any time to back away, Izuku used his only free limb to hit him. Izuku headbutt the teen. Breaking the rest of his body out of the ice, Izuku deliver a punch to Todoroki's gut once again. God damn it, why can't you see? Izuku shouted as he leapt away from the teen. It doesn't matter what the quirk does, or who it came from, what matters what you do with. It's your power and your life. Izuku shouted. Those words resonated with the two-tone teen. They brought a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. His mind was flooded with memories of her. That warm feeling began to expand outward until it exploded. Everyone watching was in shock. Was this your plan the whole time? Yaoyorozu thought, watching the battle from up in the stands. Can I beat that? Bakugou thought as worry began making its way through him. A certain golden-haired girl watched through her TV screen. The only thing breaking her out of her concentration was a woman with green hair and green clothes walking into the room, behind her having a guy with white hair and dog ears on the top of his head and two wheat-skinned women, one with white clothing, the other with red. Are you watching the UA Sports Festival? The green-haired woman asked, to which the blonde girl nodded her head. Do you see anyone you like? She continued. The blonde-haired girl pointed toward Izuku. Him. I don't get why you would sit and watch some weakling duke it out. The white-haired guy said. Right after he said it, the hand of one of the wheat-skinned women slapped him on the head. Shut up, Bet. Tiona said before turning back to the blonde girl. Good choice, Ace. That soul is appealing. A woman with silver hair said while sitting in her seat, a glass of wine in hand. It's pure and as bright as the sun. I want it. Izuku watched Todoroki burst into flames and only had one thought. Appealing. Everyone in the stadium was in shock about what the hell was happening. Even the people that came to boo at Izuku couldn't move. You wanted this? Todoroki asked Izuku, to which he nodded. Since you're going all out, it's only fair that I do as well. Izuku said. I want to be a hero. Izuku's right hand lit up with blue sparkles appearing all around it. The sound of the bell playing out through the whole stadium, the flames coming from Todoroki intensified as the teens stared at each other. Izuku began charging at the teen. Todoroki shot toward Izuku, fire and ice shooting out of each of his sides. Midnight was too entranced by the teens to even think about stopping them. Izuku raised his right as he got closer to Todoroki, and Todoroki did the exact same. Firebolt. Izuku shouted while at the same time, thank you. Todoroki said. The white lightning began shooting around Izuku's hand as a white beam shot toward Todoroki while a heatwave shot toward Izuku. The attack collided in mid-air, causing them both to explode outward, sending a gust of wind at both the teens. The bright light consumed the entire arena. As the light faded, Midnight saw something she wasn't expecting. Shoto Todoroki is out of bounds. Izukumidoriya moves on to the next round. The entire stadium roared for both the teens. Having pushed himself a little too far, Izuku passed out in the arena. As Izuku was getting picked up to be taken to the nurse's office, Yaoyorozu got up from her seat and made her way out the door to head down, something which didn't go unnoticed by a certain purple-haired student. We're having a small break while the arena gets repaired. Midnight announced. Yaoyorozu made her way over to the nurse's office and walked in. She got permission to be there by Recovery Girl before walking over and sitting down next to Izuku. She sat there and looked at him for a few seconds before a thought passed through her head. He's quite cute when he sleeps. Wait, where the hell did that come from? She thought as a blush made its over her face. Izuku slowly opened his eyes and saw Yaoyorozu, her face fully red. He sat up. Morning. He said with a slight chuckle. She turned around to face him, the red hue still covering her face. Izuku noticed it and immediately became worried about her. Yaoyorozu, your face is red. Are you okay? Izuku asked, thinking that she might be sick. The red color intensified. Yeah, I'm fine. She said, trying to keep what little composure she had left. An announcement caught them both off guard. Would Hitoshi Shinso and Momo Yaoyorozu make their way to the waiting rooms? The blush disappeared from Yaoyorozu's face as she got up. Good luck. Izuku said with a thumbs up and a smile. Yaoyorozu felt something pull on her heart, a warm feeling spread its way through her body. Yeah. She made her way to the waiting room as Izuku made his way to the 1A stands after asking about Todoroki. She walked in and saw on the screen the ending to the Ida vs Shiozaki fight. I guess Midoriya is fighting Ida next. Wait, why am I thinking about him right now? I need to focus on how I'm going to win. Momo groaned out loud. From what I saw, for him to use his quirk you need to listen to what he has to say, or maybe it's if you talk to him. Would Momo Yaoyorozu make their way to the stage? Momo let out a deep sigh as she made her to the stage. As she walked on stage, the feeling of being watched intensified once again and her body stiffened up. Quite the amount of people. Shinso said. Yaoyorozu stayed silent, not wanting to even give him the time of day. Begin. Yaoyorozu created a sword and began charging at him. People like you are so blessed, look at your quirks, all so flashy and hero-like. Shinso shouted while taking a step back. Yaoyorozu remained silent as she kept charging, fully intent on winning this. She got a few feet away from him and was about to swing her sword. Midoriya's a fool, who pushes his opponent to get stronger. Something about him saying that made something within her snap. Don't talk about him like th. She was cut off as her entire body froze, completely unable to move. People like you always fall for that. The world felt foggy to Yaoyorozu. No, it was her mind that was foggy. Walk off the stage for me. Yaoyorozu slowly walked past Shinso and toward the edge. No, turn around. Listen to me. I can't lose, he believes in me. She thought was images of Izuku passed through her head. I don't want to lose. Momo Yaoyorozu is out of bounds. Hitoshi Shinso moves on to the next round. Her mind returned to normal, she looked toward Shinso. You fell just the rest of them. Yaoyorozu walked toward her tunnel feeling dejected by what had happened. She made her way to the girls' toilet to have some time to herself before she went to face the rest of class. Izuku wanted to run down and help her but got stuck by an announcement telling him to make his way to the waiting room. Begin. Midnight shouted once again. Kendo and Bakugou both made their way toward one another. Bakugou shot toward her, preparing his normal right hook. She saw this coming and expanded her fist to block it. However, Bakugou set an explosion to his left and blasted around to the right of her fist. Without giving her a chance to fight back, he blasted toward her body. She couldn't dodge or block, so the explosion slammed right into her stomach. Continuing, Bakugou shot toward her and grabbed her wrist before using an explosion to make it bigger and threw her out of the arena, winning him the game in only a few moves. Izuku watched Kendo get decimated before he began making his way to the stage. As he was on his way there, his phone pinged. He gave it a quick look before he had to give his phone to the holder. It was Yaoyorozu. You got this, was all it said. He gave a quick smile before walking out toward the stage to face off against Ida. The two teens stared at each other for a good few seconds before Midnight started the match. She began coughing violently after the shout. Ida shot toward Izuku and aimed for his head. Izuku saw this coming and dodged down. As Ida's leg passed by his head, he raised his right hand and placed it on the back of his leg. Firebolt. The flames shot into his engine. Ida got carried away by the force but tried to go back for another kick, but his leg puffed out smoke. Did he overheat my engine? Ida thought as he looked at Izuku and saw him smiling. Izuku then began running at him, fully intent on making this a close-range battle. Izuku, once he got close enough, threw a punch that connected with Ida's face, which knocked his glasses off his face and shattering once they hit the ground. Using the fact Ida now couldn't see properly, Izuku punched him again in the chest, knocking him back. Izuku kept up his flurry of punches, not giving Ida the chance to fight back. A certain ginger teen saw this and couldn't help but be reminded of her own fighting style in the first round. Izuku managed to push Ida all the way to the edge before kicking him once in the chest, knocking him out of the ring. Tenya Ida is out of bounds, Izukumidoriya moves on to the finals. Izuku extended his hand to Ida, he didn't like him, but that was no reason not to have a show of good sportsmanship. Izuku could feel himself getting more and more exhausted as the day went on, using his quirk so much was beginning to wear him down, which is why he decided to try and beat Ida while only using it when he needs to, but most likely this next fight is going to be the most exhausting. Izuku made his way back to the waiting room as Bakugou and Shinso made their way to the stage. Bakugou made eye contact with the tired teen, as soon the match started Bakugou shot toward him. Shinso tried to say something but Bakugou just ignored him and sent an explosion directly at his chest, blasting Shinso to the edge, but before he fell off Bakugou grabbed him, and held him suspended in the air. You rely too much on your quirk, try working on your body before he tried to enter the hero course. He said as Shinso used his quirk on him, causing Bakugou's hand to open as his brain went foggy. Hitoshi Shinso is out of bounds, Katsuki Bakugou moves on to the finals. Izuku got called back to the stage for the final round of the sports festival. On his way there he approached the exit to the tunnel and saw a few people standing there. Welf stood with a smile on his face, I got everyone you beat and Bakugou beat. Izuku smiled at the red-haired teen before facing everyone they had faced, I'm going to win this. He said. Uraraka pumped her fist into the air, do your best. I swear if you lose. Kendo joked with a smile on her face. Todoroki just looked at Izuku, still confused by why he was dragged here by Welf. Ida and Shinso were nowhere to be found. Welf raised his thumb up at Izuku with a smile on his face. Yaoyorozu stood there smiling, good luck. He walked out with a smile on his face. He made his way to the stage. Once he arrived he could feel the fire beside him raging, the shouts of cheater from the students was no longer there. Begin. Midnight said rather quietly as she had lost her voice from all the shouting. Without giving Bakugou a chance to try and fight back, Izuku shot his flames directly toward him. Bakugou blasted through them. You really think a move as slow as that will beat me? Bakugou shouted as he placed his hand on Izuku's chest and blasted him at point-blank range. Izuku however didn't just stand there and take it as he pushed his hand up and against Bakugou's face before shooting his flames right at him. Both teens were blasted back from each other. Bakugou landed and shot back toward Izuku, not wanting to give a chance to get away. Izuku saw him and moved to the right to dodge the explosive teen, taking the small chance he had. Izuku punched him in the stomach, Bakugou ignored. And kicked Izuku in the face before skidding to a stop and placing his hand on Izuku's stomach and blasting him back toward the center on the arena. I'll give this everything I've got to win. Bakugou shouted as he shot into the air and began spinning. Izuku remembered seeing something like this when they were younger, where Bakugou would start spinning and then blow him up while shouting something like Death Tornado. Meaning he was about to use an attack he's been making since they were kids, I want to be a hero, one that never loses. The bright light consumed Izuku's hand, as he extended it out toward Bakugou who was about to finish his move. Firebolt/howitzer impact. The two teens shouted at each other, the light and explosion devoured the entire arena. Bakugou landed and looked into the smoke. Sparkles can only use that light thing twice a day, meaning I win. Bakugou thought as he watched the smoke and dust. As he began to relax, very confident in his victory, green eyes shot out of the smoke and made for a punch on Bakugou. Bakugou reacted as fast as he could and tried to punch Izuku in the face. Izuku dodged to the side and felt the wind pass by his head, before he punched Bakugou in the stomach. Thanks for the idea, Todoroki. Izuku thought as he shouted. Firebolt. The flames covered his right hand, making his punch even stronger. He let out a scream as he pushed his fist further into Bakugou's stomach. The flames shot out and shot Bakugou out of the arena and into the wall, knocking him out. Katsuki Bakugou is out of bounds, Izukumidoriya the winner of the first-year sports festival. Midnight said as the entire stadium began shouting and roaring for the winner. Izuku, once again having overused his quirk to the fullest, passed out. Now on to the medals. Midnight announced having drunk some cough syrup. Izuku stood on the top pedestal while Bakugou stood on number 2 and Shinso on number 3. And to hand out the medals is everyone's favorite hero, All Might. She shouted as the man himself came flying down and landed in front of all the students. So before I hand out any medals, I just want to say a huge great job to everyone that gave this their all. Any one of you could be standing up here instead of these 3. So push yourselves even farther next year. All Might said while looking out toward the stands for the students. He picked up the 3 medals and made his way over the 3 students. A fantastic job to you, young Shinso. A support course student in the top 3 is unheard of, and yet here you are showing that people shouldn't look down on you. If you ever decide to become a hero, you will definitely be a top pro. All Might to the tired-looking teen. Thank you, All Might, for the kind words. Shinso said. All Might then placed the medal around his neck, before walking over to Bakugou. Young Bakugou, your skill and power are nothing to scoff at. Next year I'm sure you can make it to the top as long as you train strong. Bakugou didn't even look toward the hero, instead, he just stood there looking toward the ground. All Might made his way to the top spot and stood right in front of Izuku. Congrats, young Midoriya, you won this year with amazing levels of skill, power and knowledge. You should be proud, but don't let his win go to your head. There will be many more challenges in the future. Izuku looked up at him and felt a sickness rise in his stomach. He pushed it back down before smiling at the pro. Thank you. That was all he said as All Might placed the medal around his neck. It had been a few days since the sports festival, and needless to say, when he got home after the festival he was out like a light, but now fully rested and ready for school he made his way to the train station. He stepped on to the first train that came, and it was packed. He could barely see the roof of the train car. He felt his entire body be pushed together. Hey, aren't you the kid who won the sports festival? Some guy that was pushing against Izuku shouted out for the world to hear. Izukumidoriya. Some else shouted, having heard the first guy. It wasn't long now until the entire train car erupted into shouts and cheers, everyone showing their support of Izuku's journey to become a hero. Izuku got off the train and walked toward the exit of the station and noticed it was raining. He pulled his foldable umbrella out of his bag and unfolded it before walking out into the rain. He made his way toward UA, however when he got close to the gate he heard the sound of an engine behind. He turned around to see what was making the sound and saw his classmate Tenya Ida running toward him in a raincoat and rain boots on. Midoriya. If you don't hurry you're going to be late. Izuku looked at the taller teen, then at his phone, and saw it was still 5 minutes until the start of school. There are still 5 minutes. Izuku shouted back to the teen, sounding somewhat uninterested. And as UA students we must arrive to school early, he said as he shot past Izuku. Izuku watched as the teen shot past him and around the corner into UA. Okay. Izuku said quietly, keeping it to himself and dragging it out before he quickly followed the speedy teen. Rather quickly he arrived in the classroom and looked around. For some reason the air in the class felt tense. Very few people were talking, and the ones that were being quiet about it. Izuku walked over to his table and placed down his bag before making his way over to Yaoyorozu's table. Hey, why's the room so tense? He asked as Yaoyorozu looked at him like he was insane for not knowing. You know what happened to Ingenium, right? Yeah, I heard about it. Why? Izuku asked once again, getting a weird look from Yaoyorozu, who seemed to piece together how limited Izuku's knowledge about his classmates was. Ingenium is Ida's brother. Yaoyorozu could physically see it click in Izuku's head. Now everything made sense, why he wasn't at the podiums after the sports festival, the tense air around the class, but everything seemed normal with him when he called out to Izuku just outside the school. Izuku glanced at him for a second before walking back to his desk. Before the door slid open, in walked Aizawa, now out of his mummy-like state, something which Azuri pointed out while saying how glad she was that he was better. However, Izuku could see at his place at the front, the person in front of him was invisible, that Aizawa had a scar under his right eye. I hope you all had a great extended weekend, but we're back to class with a special class of hero informatics. The mood of the class visibly went down. The door slid open and stepping inside was Midnight, who then announced exactly what this class was going to be. Today you'll be picking hero names. Everyone began cheering and shouting with excitement. All the sound stopped as Midnight cracked her WHP, Mineta shivered. Yaoyorozu was suddenly disgusted with the purple gremlin yet again. Everyone please take a whiteboard and a pen. The entire class walked up and got one. Once you've written them down you'll be presenting them at the front of the class. Once again the mood in the room went down. A few minutes passed and nobody moved from their spots, nobody wanted to go up. That was until one brave soldier stepped up to the challenge. Shining hero, I cannot stop twinkling. Aoyama shouted from the metaphorical rooftops, not ashamed nor deterred by what others may think. That's a whole sentence. The entire class thought at once while looking at the shining team. Aoyama's horrible name made them all the more nervous, but one of them was given a bout of courage thinking, it can't be any worse than his. Rainy season hero, Froppy. Azui shouted from the front of the class. It was just what the rest of them needed to stand up and present theirs. Next up was everyone's favorite pink classmate Mina Ashido stepped up and shouted from the, again metaphorical, rooftop. Alien Queen. That was quickly rejected by Midnight and Mina walked back down to her seat rather dejected. Izuku sat watching his classmates go up one by one. What do I call myself? Izuku thought, thinking about all the names he came up with his mum when he was a kid made him sick nowadays, all of them having some form of reference to All Might. Needless to say, he wasn't going with any of them, but then a thought popped into his head, it was a stupid name and the reason for it was also dumb, but it was all he had. All that's left is for Ida and Midoriya, and Bakugou needs to rework his. I don't see the problem with mine. Bakugou yelled at the teacher. Ida stepped up. Written on the board was simply his name. Just your name as well? Yes, I had no idea what to call myself. Ida said. Okay then, Midoriya, you're up now. He took his whiteboard and made his way to the front. Tension was high as he made his way over to the front. He held the board against his chest. The reason's pretty stupid, but it was the only thing I could come up with. He turned the board around to face the entire class. Written on it was a single word. Bell. The class had mixed opinions, but in the end, it was his hero name, so they kept them to themselves. Not bad. You said the reason was dumb, why? Midnight asked. When I use the bright light power thing, it makes the sound of a bell, so when people hear a bell or the name Bell I want them to feel safe. Your reason isn't stupid, it's perfectly valid. You want people to feel safe when they hear it. That's what every hero hopes. Izuku smiled at this, glad someone agreed with him. Taking that in stride, Izuku walked back to his seat rather proud of his hero name. Well, Class 1A, now that's over, I'll be taking my leave now. Midnight said as she took a few steps toward the door. She stopped. Midoriya, come see me in the teacher's lounge after school please, she said with a wink. I want to talk to you about your quirk. Izuku could feel the gaze of Mineta shooting its way into his back. Clearly, the purple creature was envious of him. Aizawa stood up from within his sleeping bag and hopped over to the front of the class. His arms shot out of the bag and slapped the board behind him. At the same time a screen appeared on it with some students' names on it. Izuku's name sat at the top with 4709. Next to his name just below him was Bakugou with 2178, and below him was Todoroki with 1345. These are the number of hero agencies that sent in internship offers. Izuku almost passed out after he realized that over 4,000 heroes wanted him to join them. Yaoyorozu looked at the screen and saw that she had 109 offers. Why do so many heroes want me to work with them? Yaoyorozu thought. Ah, so I won't get to do any internships. Mina almost cried. Don't worry, everyone will be going to do internships. I simply didn't tell you that so you would try even harder in the sports festival. Aizawa said with a massive smile on his face. He walked around putting everyone's offers on their table. You have 2 days to go through this list and pick a hero agency. Aizawa said. Izuku looked at the massive stack of paper on his table and began skimming through the pages, until his eyes landed on a name he wasn't expecting to see, Sword Princess. The majority of people in the room turned to look at him. Did you actually get an offer from the Sword Princess? Kaminari shouted at him. The Sword Princess was the number 4 hero in Japan, her strength only being beaten by King and All Might. Endeavor was number 3, but that was only because of the number of cases he resolves. If the Sword Princess and Endeavor went head to head, no holding back, nobody knows who would win. Getting an internship offer from her is a big deal. Izuku in that moment decided where he was going to go. Yaoyorozu was looking at her list of options and her eyes widened at the name she saw. Sword Princess, she said in a way very similar to Izuku from moments before. Now all the attention turned to her. You too. Mina shouted. I got one as well. Todoroki chimed in. The class turned to him, shrugged and then turned back to Yaoyorozu and Izuku. After class, Izuku went over to Yaoyorozu and Todoroki's tables. So are you two going to the Sword Princess's agency? Izuku asked the two teens. Nah, I've decided to go to Endeavor's agency. I'm going to use him to get stronger. Todoroki said, looking down at his table. He's changed. Izuku realized as he looked at Todoroki. Yeah, I'll probably go there. Yaoyorozu said, what about you? Yeah, I plan on going there. Great, we'll get to go together. As Izuku walked down a hallway on his way to the teacher's lounge, those words resounded in his head. This was the first time a girl was happy to be with him. He knocked, then slid the door open. In front of him was Midnight in normal clothes sitting on a couch that Izuku didn't even know UA had. Ah, Midoriya, come on in. She said while pointing to a seat on the other side of a table from the couch. Izuku walked in and sat down. So what's this about my quirk? Izuku asked as he got comfy in the seat. Basically, I looked into how it works a bit more. You said it activates when you focus on something you want to do. Izuku nodded. Well, way I see it, your power pulls your willpower outward and manifests it into the outside. So I've decided to call it heroic longing, or another name I came up with was Argonaut. Argonaut, as in the first hero, the man that kicked off the Age of Heroes. That Argonaut? Izuku asked, slightly baffled by what his lady was saying. Yep, the quirkless man who killed a villain. Izuku's jaw fell to the floor. He loved the story of the Argonaut, someone who was a clown and a fool yet still stood up to face the villain that was about to destroy his city. The story takes place near the start of quirks. So my quirk is called Argonaut then? If you want it to be. It was a few days after that Izuku and Yaoyorozu were on a train on their way to the Sword Princess's agency. As they got out of the train, they made their way over to the agency building. They walked into the building and saw there was nobody at the reception desk. They went over to the desk and saw a piece of paper with their names on it. Yaoyorozu opened the letter and read it out to Izuku. Please head up to the 3rd floor. That was all that was written on it. The two walked over to the elevator and pressed the button. Though it didn't seem like it was working, they looked to the right and saw a staircase leading up. They walked over and began ascending. They quickly arrived on the 3rd floor and opened the door. It looked like a built-in gym. There were mats all over the floor. They walked into the middle of the floor, not seeing the Sword Princess anywhere. Out of nowhere the Sword Princess appeared and began running at them, her sword sheath in her hand. The two teens were confused and the Sword Princess used this to her advantage. She moved her sheath toward Yaoyorozu, sending it right into her stomach. Yaoyorozu fell down, struggling to breathe. Yaoyorozu! Izuku shouted as he dropped his case and ran. At the woman, he raised his right and shouted, Firebolt. The flames shot toward the hero, who dodged them and cut the distance faster than Izuku could hope to. She spun on her left foot, raising her right foot. Her heel slammed into his face, knocking him back. You're both slow and you have many blind spots. The woman said. We'll work on this. It was now that they realized how strong this next week was going to be. The two lay on the ground because of the pain. The Sword Princess stood over them looking down. Reveria, can you heal them, please? The Sword Princess asked a green-haired woman who just walked in. She nodded and walked over before crouching down and waving her hand above Yaoyorozu while mumbling something. before a green light consumed her hand and Yaoyorozu felt her pain fade away. She quickly moved over to Izuku and done the exact same thing. Izuku got up and quickly recognized her. "That's 9 hells." Izuku shouted, looking at the rather appealing green, almost jade-colored hair. "Wait, as in one of the most powerful women in the world, 9 hells." "Oh, I wouldn't go that far," Reveria said. "You fought Stars and Stripes," Izuku shouted at her. "And lost," a man with light gray hair and dog ears said. "Vandergand as well," Izuku shouted once again, only to the dog man's annoyance. Oh, who am I?" A girl with wheat skin and white clothes had only covered what had to be covered, said, leaning in close to Izuku. "Crusher," Izuku shouted once again while blushing up a storm. "Oh, he does know." "Ahem," Ace said. "Can you guys leave? I'm trying to train them. We're just on our way out now." A small man with blonde hair and a spear said as he and some others made their way toward the staircase Izuku and Yaoyorozu had just walked up. "Ah, but I wanted to play with Firebolt." Tiona whined as she got dragged away by a small but yet very thick man with a massive axe in the other hand. At hearing her call him that, Izuku began blushing much more than before. They all exited the room. Izuku and Yaoyorozu turned to the Sword Princess. "They were only here to meet you two. They are on their way back to the Twilight Manor," the woman quickly said. "So Miss Sword dash," Izuku was cut off. "Ace. Miss Wall dash. Ace," she said once again, cutting him off. "Miss Ace," Izuku managed to say this time. "Why did you send an offer to us?" Izuku asked, trying to sound as nice as possible. "I saw things I could fix, same goes for the fire and ice guy," Ace said. She then pointed over to Yaoyorozu. "You let your emotions get the best of you, and that caused you to lose the entire thing." Yaoyorozu began looking down. She knew this already, but to have someone push in front of her face like that hurt. Izuku saw the pain on her face and opened his mouth to try and argue back, but was cut off as Ai's swung her finger around to him. "And you were too obvious when you used your quirk. Also, what was that hand-to-hand combat that made fighters all over the world look bad?" Izuku felt like her finger was shooting the words right into his heart. "But I invited you here to help teach you to be better, so next time something like that happens you'll be ready and strong enough to win every fight." Izuku was about to say that he did win every fight, but decided against it after remembering how much her kick hurt. "So go put on your hero costumes and meet me back in here." The two teens walked toward another door on the floor they were on. Izuku entered the male changing room, his costumes case in hand. He placed the case down and pressed a button on it. He opened it and saw something that didn't look like his costume at all. At the top was a note. "Hey Midoriya, so turns out I'm in charge of your hero costume, so I worked with the costume designer to make this baby. I call it Pionkichi MK4. I've made a few in the past, but they've never been as good as this one. Anyway, I hope you enjoy using it. From your best friend Wealth." Izuku placed the note down and took the armor out of the case. It was white armor that covered both shoulders and lower arms, covering his elbow, red orbs sitting just above the end of the wrist armor, a lightweight piece of chest armor that only covered the top half. At the top of was a little piece of metal guarding his mouth against attacks, 2 pieces of knee armor. On the left side of the armor of was red lines moving down. He had black under armor on with just under the knee boots. And a pouch sitting on the right side of his hip. He put in his red contacts and noticed they felt different. The screen popped up with another message from Wealth. "I worked with Hatsum to make these much better, so you can now wear them permanently." As annoying as getting all his gear changed was, he was rather thankful for it. He walked out of the room and entered the gym again. They both looked at him for a second before Yaoyorozu spoke up. "What happened to your costume?" "Wealth changed it." "He can do that?" "Apparently. He's part of the support course, right?" Ace asked. Both teens nodded. UA gives every member of the hero course a person in the support course they can go to for costume changes. They've done that since even before I went there. Izuku then wondered who Yaoyorozu's assigned support course student was. "First thing we'll work on is close-range combat. Ace said, to which both teens were looking pretty worried. Yaoyorozu, you'll be focusing on learning how to use that sword and shield you used during the tournament. Midoriya, what weapon will you be using? Ace asked. Izuku thought about it for a second. He didn't really know how to use any form of weapon. He quickly remembered something. He reached his hand down and unsheathed his knife. This. Do you know how to use it at all? Izuku shook his hand. Hand it to me. Ace took the blade and held it in her hand. She put it into a stabbing position. Izuku let out a small giggle toward the woman. She then once again spun on her left foot and slammed her right foot into his face again, this time with less force but still enough to send him flying. Izuku slowly stood back up and Ace handed him his knife. She took a few steps back before drawing her sword. I can't teach as well as VERYYYY, but I can at least do this. She placed her sword down and held the sheath toward them. Something about her changed and they both noticed this. Yaoyorozu created a sword while Izuku gripped his knife harder. Good, watch as much as you can. Izuku realized he'll have to learn to fight from first-hand experience. Izuku felt his hand become clammy. The sweat building up made his grip lessen a tiny bit. The pressure from her eyes was overwhelming. The difference between them was clear to Izuku already and they hadn't even taken a step forward. You're scared. Ace said, staring at Izuku. Yaoyorozu dropped her defense to look at the teen. It's okay to be afraid. Fears tells you where the edge is, and when to stop, but there's something else. Izuku was not expecting to hear about his fears and didn't want to hear about them. Her face never changing, Ace took a step toward Izuku. I don't know what you're so afraid of, but at this rate, when you face it, you'll only be able to run away. Her words cut deep into him. She was right, and he knew that suddenly he was pulled back to that day, standing right where Ace was. Shigaraki stood staring Izuku down. Fear began running amok through him. He gripped tightly onto the blade, adrenaline pumping its way through his veins. He takes a step forward, then another. Wait. Too slow. The feeling of the cold gym mat ran its way through him. There was a pain in his ribs. He saw her move. No, that was giving it too much credit. He saw a blur smack him in the side. He arose and brought his blade up and pointed it at the woman again. Another blur and then slam. He felt her weapon slam into his stomach. Pain shot through as he got sent backwards by the force of the attack. I can't breathe. It hurts so much. I want to cry. I want to. No, I can't cry, not here. You aren't used to pain, but you can't be afraid of it. Izuku quickly got back to his feet, but before he could do anything she kicked his knee, knocking him back down to the ground. His face slammed against the mat. Being a hero means you can't leave any openings. Don't give villains a chance, just try to follow my attacks for now. She said as Izuku stood back up and pointed his knife toward her. Yaoyorozu was just standing watching Izuku get beaten down. Ace rushed him again. Izuku was just barely managing to redirect her attacks. We top heroes often say that some heroes are pulled around by their quirk, she said as 3 more hits make contact with different spots on Izuku's body. People depend on their quirks, but ability and technique are different. Even if you lose your quirk, these skills will not fail you. Izuku saw a chance and swung toward her. When people see an opening, they become predictable. Ace said as she sidestepped his attack and elbowed him in the stomach, knocking him back down to the ground. Techquine and strategy, you lack both. She said, staring down at his almost lifeless body. Her cold glare then turned to Yaoyorozu, who gulped. Izuku slowly walked out of the changing room, bruises already making their way over his body. His entire body ached. He walked to the stairs and went down to the 2nd floor. He walked in and saw Ace without her hero costume on, setting a table for the 3 of them. She was wearing a white dress with a blue outline. The back of the dress was black. The dress itself went down to her thighs. Ace had made their food and Yaoyorozu was already sitting at the table eating her fill, but it made sense. As to why, during her training with Ace she had used her quirk a lot, as Ace kept breaking everything she made. Is every day going to be like this? Izuku asked as he sat down and continued to eat. Yes. Ace very simply said, the things we'll work on tomorrow is your quirk. You have a tendency to shout whenever you use it, that gives away the fact you're about to use it. Izuku had never thought about it like that. The rest of the meal went by pretty quickly and they made their way up to the 4th floor. they had spent the entire day training as they were pretty tired by the time they got up the stairs and into their rooms. Izuku laid down on the bed and remembered the fear he felt earlier. He opened his eyes and saw that same man who had been staring at him in his dreams for the past few weeks. Shigaraki was once again standing there a few feet away from Izuku. He took a step and the sound it made was comparable to that of a knock, another step and another until he broke into a full charge toward Izuku. As he was about to reach to him, Izuku shot up in the bed and heard the knocking coming from the door. "Come in." He yelled loud enough for the person on the other side to hear. The door slowly began opening, light seeping its way into the room. Standing in the door was a girl with black hair that fell down to around her shoulder blades. "What's up, Yaoyorozu?" Izuku asked, sitting up a bit more in his bed. The girl seemed fidgety, her fingers never stopping twiddling with each other. She stepped inside and out of the light, blending in the darkness rather well due to her hair. She slowly closed the door behind her as she took a few more steps toward Izuku, who was still just sitting on the bed, now a bit more confused and tense due to a girl being in what was technically his room. "Sorry, but I thought I'd come to see how you were." Izuku slightly tilted his head while looking at the girl. Her fidgeting had gotten worse as she spoke. Izuku noticed this and was about to ask her what she meant by that, then he followed her gaze and saw that she was looking at his arm. It clicked in his brain why she was here. "Yeah, don't worry, I haven't done that since the day of the festival," Izuku said. His mood was clearly somewhat lowered by the conversation topic. "Do you want to talk about anything?" Her voice was soft yet carried clear concern in it, something Izuku was still not fully used to yet. Izuku sat there silent for a few seconds. Yaoyorozu took this time to sit down next to him on the bed. Izuku let out a sigh. "The nightmares are still happening," he said simply. During the time after the sports festival, the two had a long chance to talk about things. Izuku had explained about the nightmares but didn't mention anything else about his past, deciding that while a lot of things are now out in the open, he should keep some things to himself. Especially about the last 10 months before entering UA. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Yaoyorozu asked, her hands more fidgety than before. "No, it's fine, just knowing that I have someone to talk to is enough, thank you," Izuku replied, forcing a smile onto his face. All of a sudden Yaoyorozu realized that she was sitting on a boy's bed, in his room, at night. A pink hue dusted her face as she shot up from the bed and took a step toward the door. "Well, if you need me, you know where to find me." Izuku sat watching her back as she took another step toward the door. Something within him didn't want her to leave. Suddenly he felt his fingers wrap around something. He looked and saw his hand extended out, grabbing onto her hand. She turned around to give him a side glance. Something about the moonlight shining in through the window combined with the pink color on her face. Izuku could only think how appealing she looked at this moment. "Ah, sorry, it's nothing." Izuku pulled his hand back and grabbed his other hand, his face slightly red. "Okay then." Yaoyorozu walked toward the door, her back facing Izuku. She stepped out of the room and slowly closed the door. "Good night." The door shut. Izuku looked down at his hand and then looked out the window, raindrops covering the glass. "Why did I reach out?" After closing the door, she placed her right hand over her chest, her face now fully red. "Why is my heart beating so fast?" Having already gone through the ringer for the day, Izuku was sitting watching Ace pummel Yaoyorozu. Something about the fact that it wasn't him getting the SHT kicked out of them made him somewhat happy, but at the same time, for some reason, he really didn't like watching Yaoyorozu suffer like this. He was conflicted, to say the least. Ace once again slammed her sheath into Yaoyorozu's shoulder, causing the girl to drop her weapon. Quickly she made another, but the top pro kicked it on the flat, breaking it in a few seconds. Momo created another shield, but the tip of the sheath easily broke through it. Yaoyorozu stumbled back due to the force of the attack. Ace saw this and jumped into action. Her knee found its way right into the stomach of the teenager. Yaoyorozu fell to the ground and all her breath left her at that moment, causing her to struggle to get back up. Ace noticed this and then quickly turned her attention to Izuku, who was not ready at all. She rushed over to the unsuspecting teen and swept him out from under his leg. Izuku fell down and Ace planted her foot on his chest, not allowing him to get back up. Too slow. Her weapon smacked him on the chin. "But we'll work on that." Izuku got back to his feet as she led him up. Until now every time you use your quirk you shout, right? Ace questioned the young teen. Yeah. Why? Izuku asked as he tilted his head at the woman. You don't have to shout. Izuku got even more confused at what the blonde woman said. There are 3 types of quirk: transformation types, mutant types and emitter types. Within these types are sub-quirk types. A good example of this is Fat Gum. He has an accumulation type quirk. Quirks like yours fall under the chant category, like mine. With chant quirks, it's a common misconception that you need to shout it to active them. Watch me. She said as she took a few steps back. Tempest. She said in a calm voice. Wind was visibly flowing around her, it shot itself up her blade covering it in pure power. Now you try. She said as she relaxed and the wind dissipated. Izuku raised his right hand. Firebolt. He said in barely a whisper, the scarlet flames that looked almost like lightning shot out of his hand and toward a wall where it slammed and stopped. I've never thought about trying it without shouting. Good job, now let's back to our usual training. Izuku gulped. A woman was sitting on a red almost throne-like seat was watching the two train from through the window. She held a wine glass in her right hand. The glass itself was filled to about halfway with red wine which the woman swirled around. Otter? Yes, my lady. The tall boar man stood beside the silver-haired woman, his rust-like eyes staring the woman down. His soul has grown once again. Yet I wish for it to shine brighter. Any ideas? The woman asked the tall man. Otter answered almost immediately, perhaps he needs to overcome his fears. The boar man suggested, to which the woman's eyes widened. Do you think time will solve this problem? The woman asked. Yes, absolutely, however. The man's words lingered in the air as the woman turned her head up to look at him. Those who do not go on adventures will never break out of their shells. The man's words hung for a few seconds as the woman looked back through the window. She knew he was right. After all, he was the number 2 hero, so he had to know something about it. It annoyed her to admit, but it seems Otter understands him more than she does. I leave him in your hands, Otter. And that alone makes her jealous. Yes, Lady Freya. The man said as he walked out of the door and toward the exit of the building. He knew exactly what to pit against the boy in order to make him grow. He now simply has to find it. Standing in the bloody alleyway was a man draped in black with a BLD red scarf hanging around his neck and forehead. His blade dripping with the BLD of a recently slain hero. He whipped the blade through the air before quickly stopping. All the BLD flung itself off the blade and added itself to the pool of expanding BLD on the ground. The bustling sounds of the streets filled the back alleyways of Hosu City. He leapt up into the air and planted his feet on a nearby wall of less than a second before leaping further up the wall. He reached the rooftop of the building and looked out over the rest of the city. The bright shine of the sun was in stark contrast to the darkness in the alley. He stepped over to the edge and squatted down. Something about the people walking around, smiles covering their faces, made him remember why everyone can smile. The one man he looked up to. The only true hero, All Might, was the reason the world was happy, knowing they had someone like him to watch over them. He let a smile creep onto his face, though anyone that saw it would instantly realize that his smile was nothing like the people on the ground. No, his was evil. He opened his eyes and was staring at the roof of the room he was in. Something about being slammed onto the floor over and over again was becoming slightly relaxing. Until he quickly remembered that there are 2 girls standing around watching him get knocked out over and over again. Izuku quickly shot up into a sitting position, looked around and saw Ace and Yaoyorozu training. How long was I out for? Oh good, you're awake. Ace said as she turned to face Izuku. Yaoyorozu saw this and began swngng at the woman. Ace dodged them all without getting hit once. Izuku looked down toward the ground. Yaoyorozu went in for another attack but was stopped by Ace placing her hand in front of the girl. She then quickly followed the woman's gaze and saw Izuku looking rather down about something. Is something bothering you? Izuku looked back up toward the two. Am I getting any stronger? Izuku asked. Clearly this was bothering him a lot. Why do you want to know? Ace asked back. It's just I keep getting knocked out, so I was curious. Ace looked him dead in the eyes and answered his question. Yes, and very fast, enough to surprise me. Izuku was caught off guard by the compliment. And it's most likely my fault that you keep passing out. I keep forgetting my own strength. The mood in the room dropped very fast as Ace's face showed clear sadness in it. Can I ask you something? The woman said as she looked toward Izuku. Go ahead. Why are you growing so fast? Izuku was taken aback. Was he really getting stronger that fast? There was no way, right? Then a reason that may or may not be tied to why he was getting strong appeared in his head. I think it's because I have someone I want to catch up to no matter what. I put all my effort into catching up to this person. Izuku looked down, clearly embarrassed by what he was saying, but continued forward anyway. I have a clear goal that I have to reach no matter what. Was all Ace did after Izuku had announced that. Training is done today, be up bright and early tomorrow. We're going on patrol in Hosu. Both teens' eyes widened at that. They were going to patrol where the hero killer was most recently. Just knowing that he could be there was enough to send shivers down both teens' spines. So make sure you are prepared. Yes, ma'am. The two shouted as their backs straightened. The three woke up, got into their hero costumes and did their regular training, which consisted of Ace beating the two to a pulp. All in all, could be worse, like having to deal with certain people. Images of bakugou and All Might flashed in his mind, but he shook them off and quickly dodged another one of Ace's strikes, to which she kicked him in the knee and brought her weapon down onto his stomach as he fell. The three made their way through the town. It's the Sword Princess. The shouts and cheers coming from all over the place homed in on these three. Wait, aren't you the one that won the sports festival? Someone asked. Then a small group found their way around Izuku. Yaoyorozu stood there watching. She felt very out of place here. Nobody was coming near her, all of them just walking over to Izuku or Ace. Something about that hurt her. Weren't you in the sports festival too? Yaoyorozu turned around to face the soul voice and saw no one. She looked around for a second trying to find where the voice came from, until she saw hands pushing themselves into her vision from below. She looked down and saw a small girl in a cream jacket that covered her entire body. There were lumps in her hood that stood near the top of her head. Looking at her, she had chestnut hair and eyes. Looking at her from a top-down angle, Yaoyorozu could hints of red and white under the jacket. The girl carried a smile, but for some reason, Yaoyorozu could tell that something was off about the girl, though she couldn't actually tell what was wrong. Lily Iruka, hurry up. Yaoyorozu followed the sound of the voice and saw another girl, though this one had blonde hair and a yellow cardigan. The girl quickly ran off and chased after her friend. The three then quickly got away from the crowds and made their way into a train. As they rode it into Hosu, there were a few people in the train that came up to them. Most of them were children and teens. They walked out of the train at the station and made their way toward the exit, but got stopped by a little girl and her mother calling out to Izuku. Can I get your autograph? The girl asked. Izuku crouched down and the girl handed him a pen and her school notebook. Izuku wrote the name Bell into it and handed it back to the girl. Then his gaze fell to something behind the girl. Quickly he grabbed her and her mother, placing them behind him as he withdrew the knife from his sheath. The sound of metal sparking against metal made the other two heroes turn around to see what had happened. Izuku was standing defending with his blade against a creature that was trying to stab him with its claws. The creature was pale and had massive wings which expanded to the roof of the train station. However, the thing that gave it away as something inhuman was the fact that its brain was fully visible. A Nomu! Yaoyorozu shouted. As she did, Ace shot her way toward the creature. It seemed to notice this and blasted away from Izuku and into the air, dodging the top pro from slashing at it. It began fleeing and flying toward the center of the city. Secure the area and then make your way to the flames. Ace shouted as she took off after it. Izuku looked around and asked himself what flames. Quickly he switched his target to the two girls that he had saved. The little girl was looking at him with something which can only be described as pure happiness in her eyes. The mother, on the other hand, was thanking him more times than he could count. Yaoyorozu had checked on everyone in the area, making sure they were okay. After checking everyone, the two made their way after Ace and the Nomu. They exited the train station and finally saw the flames a good distance away. He could barely smell the burning, however she had managed to notice them and chase after the Nomu while also giving them orders. Izuku then realized that it wasn't just strength and skill which made her a top pro. The distance between them grew even larger. However, Izuku didn't have any time to dwell on it, as he had to make his way into the city in hopes of getting there before anyone loses their lives. As the two teens got closer and closer, they could feel the heat getting hotter and hotter. They arrived and the scene was a lot worse than either teen could imagine. The flames were roaring higher than the building themselves. There were two more Nomus. A flaming bus was blasted into the air and landed on top of two heroes before exploding and killing not only them but a few other people who were unfortunate enough to be nearby the bus. Screams echoed from the broken windows as the flames consumed the entire building. A hero was running about trying to contain the flames while shouting something about Ida going missing. Izuku quickly realized why Ida turned here in Hosu. He almost kicked himself for not seeing it sooner. He turned to Yaoyorozu. "We have to find Ida," Izuku yelled at the girl. Her eyes widened when she realized what Izuku had said. Izuku began running toward the back alleys of Hosu, hoping to find his classmate in time. They ran for a while, praying they could find something before someone else gets hurt. As they were about to run down another alley, Izuku stopped. He heard something from a different alley. Quickly he ran off toward it. Yaoyorozu saw him running and rushed to catch up to him, but somehow he was faster, a lot faster than she remembered him being. "Die, false hero." Izuku heard as he turned a corner and saw a man with a BLD red scarf and a katana high in the air about to bring it down on the child he knew as Ida. Izuku found speed within him he didn't even know existed and shot over to the two. He raised his fist and slammed into the man's crooked face. "Firebolt!" he shouted as the flames coiled down his arm and shot off his hand like a spring. The man was blasted away by the force of the attack. Yaoyorozu turned the corner in just enough time to see that attack land. She quickly ran over to where Ida was while making bandages. "Midoriya! Why are you here?" Ida shouted as he looked at the back of the green-haired teen. Izuku ignored him and continued staring at the man who looked both confused and terrifying. Quickly the memories of what he had seen on TV began flooding into his mind. Without a doubt, this man is the hero killer, Stain. Stain pointed his blade at Izuku. Another ignorant fool adds himself to the list. Izuku drew his blade despite his shaking hands. "I'm here to protect you," Izuku said as he held the knife ready for a fight. A smile appeared on Stain's face as Izuku began smiling to hide the fear inside. "Oh, now this is an interesting turn of events," the silver-haired woman said while standing on the rooftop nearby. She had been watching from a distance but decided to get close when Izuku ran into Stain. Given the location, they shouldn't be expecting backup, but she knew they were already aware of this. Ace finally arrived at the flaming hellscape that is the center of Hosu. The Nomu she was after managed to get away and regroup with the other Nomu. Having arrived, she saw two more Nomu, but the one that caught her attention was one that was pitch black in color and very muscular. He was clearly giving the other heroes around trouble. She stepped forward, flames all around her. As she did so, some of the other heroes finally noticed her and many stepped away from her. "Tempest!" she shouted as if announcing her presence. All the flames around immediately shot away as the wind swirled around her. The Nomu stopped its fight with the other heroes and looked toward her. Be it fear or survival instincts, this Nomu deemed her to be the true threat. It charged toward her. In turn, she shot toward it like a bullet. Quickly she dodged whatever attack it was about to throw her way and sliced through its arm, taking the whole thing in a single cut. BLD began flowing through the air as the beast made an almost human scream of pain. the muscles around the Nomu's stub began bubbling and expanding as they slowly climbed up, creating a new arm in the place of the old one. It closed its fist and looked toward the sword. Princess rage was burning in its eyes. Ace turned and was just as stoic as at the beginning of the fight, despite the fact her opponent just healed its whole arm. The rest of the heroes were in shock, none of them had even managed to deal damage to it. Ace pointed her sword toward her newly healed foe and rushed toward it, intent on putting it down. Yaoyorozu, having just arrived, crouched down next to Ida and began wrapping his injuries in bandages. Blood was flowing out of a cut in his shoulder. "What happened to you?" she asked. "I'm getting revenge. I won't let him get away." Rage was permeating the area around Ida. "Go, this is my fight. Like hell, I'd ever leave." Izuku shouted back. "A hero's job is to protect people, and if I can't save even one person, then I'll never be better than him." A smile grew over Stain's face as he looked at Izuku. Finally, someone worthy of being a hero. "Let's see you live up to your words." Izuku's focus shot back to the killer in front of him. Stain stepped forward and suddenly Izuku's vision was moved back to the USJ. Shigaraki ran at him, fear ran through him. "You're scared." The voice of Ace filled the emptiness and made Izuku snap back to reality. His hand was shaking. "It's okay to be afraid." Izuku squeezed down on the handle of his weapon and forced his hand to stay still. Izuku charged toward Stain. Stain raised his kanata into the air and brought it down, and Izuku clashed the sword with his knife. Sparks began flying as the two stared at each other. Wasting no time, Izuku pushed his right foot forward. Stain saw this and leapt back, dodging the attack rather easily. "He's fast, but not as fast as her," Izuku thought as images of Ace flashed in his mind. Quickly Izuku shook those images out of his mind, just in time to see the two knives flying through the air, aiming right for him. The first of the two landed squarely on Izuku's chest but was deflected by Payankichi. The second one was aiming directly for Izuku's eye, but he saw it coming and managed to barely move his head in time, so the blade gave a shallow and small cut across the side of Izuku's face. Before Izuku had any time to try and check his injury, Stain was already running at him, now holding a blade around the same size as Izuku's dagger. Izuku managed to defend against the attack. He shot his knee up and knocked the knife out of Stain's hand, however Stain leapt back to where he was before he ran at Izuku. "Izuku!" Yaoyorozu's voice rang out through the alley. Izuku looked around and saw it at the last second. Stain had thrown his kanata into the air toward Izuku, the blade cut into Izuku's left shoulder next to his head. "Ah!" Izuku's scream of pain filled the ears of those in the alley. Next thing he knew, Stain was in front of him and ripped the blade out of his body and quickly licked the blood on it. Izuku felt something flow through him as he lost control of his body and fell to the ground. Stain stepped forward and passed Izuku. "You're a true hero, so I'll let you go for now." Stain stepped past him and toward his victim. Yaoyorozu stepped up and made a sword and shield as she stared the murderer down. "Please stop." Ida pleaded, not wanting to see anyone else be butchered. "Just let him kill me." Anger began flowing through Yaoyorozu as she heard her classmate begging. "If you're genuinely asking me to stop, then you need to rethink being a hero. I'm here to save you, Ida, so I'm not about to just back down now." Yaoyorozu shouted in a fit of rage, very unlike her. The two looked at each other for a second before they both rushed toward one another. She placed her shield up to block the incoming attack from the man. Quickly she moved her sword toward Stain. He managed to dodge slightly and the blade cut through his black clothing. But the slice wasn't enough to cut through him. Using the time he was given, he went for another attack. He swung his blade, aiming right for Yaoyorozu's head. "Momo!" Izuku shouted, trying his hardest to move, to do anything. The blade inched closer and closer. Ida closed his eyes, not wanting to see the death of his friend. The sound of metal clanking against metal filled the ears of everyone in the alley. Yaoyorozu had created a small shield that covered the side of her face. Without wasting any time, Yaoyorozu's chest began glowing. Blades of all different sizes shot out from the gap in her chest. Stain saw the light and managed to dodge, but a few cut into him. Stain was still in the air when she made her next move. She shot forward and went on the attack. Unable to dodge, Stain swung his kanata in hopes of taking her down, but she swung back and cut into the side of the blade. The top half of his kanata snapped right off. Using the now halved kanata, he moved forward. The blade managed to cut into her arm. He began withdrawing the blade in hopes of licking it. However, she managed to elbow him in the wrist, causing him to drop. "I saw how you got Belle, and I won't let you do the same to me." Stain then did something completely unexpected and pushed his head toward her arm. An impact landed square on Stain's face, which pushed him back. They both turned toward where the punch came from and saw Izuku standing. "I'm glad you're safe." He held out his knife toward the killer as Yaoyorozu pointed her sword. Ida watched the two and felt frustrated at himself. Two of his classmates were protecting him because of his mistake. He tried to clench his fist but couldn't due to Stain's quirk. "Please just stop," he begged. "I hate you, even though all had happened you're still asking us to stop. Hell, even as far back as the first day of school you've annoyed me since then. So I hate you. You're weak, pathetic even." "That's what I think. What would your family say if they saw you like this? You think you're frustrated, just think how they feel. They raised him only to see him cut down by a villain. But they trust the other heroes and the police, but here you are abusing your power as a hero. Let me guess, you want to be like your brother, that's why you want to be a hero. Then here's your choice. Lay there and be saved by us and stay weak and pathetic. Or stand up, fight with us. Show us the kind of hero you want to be." Izuku told his classmate. Ida's eyes widened, as did his vision, as everything he did came rushing at him. He wanted to cry, to just break down at those words. But he didn't. Images of Tensei rushed through his mind as he looked at Izuku. He was shining just as brightly as Tensei does. A true hero. The three stared at each other before they all broke into a charge, none of them planning on backing down. Izuku was leading the charge from those two as he clashed with Stain, who had pulled out two blades from his myriad of other weapons. Quickly Stain spun and swung his other blade toward Izuku, who ducked under the attack. Izuku was now on the ground, to which Stain swung the blade Izuku clashed with toward him once again. Izuku placed his hands on the ground and he shot into the air and spun before clashing with the first blade. Stain's strength managed to push Izuku back, and then he swung with his other blade, which Izuku dodged by leaping back. Stain stepped forward to try and attack again but got cut off by Yaoyorozu, who had created two small blades that Izuku recognized immediately as the Zolas wielded by Jormungand. She pushed forward using the momentum from her charge and clashed with the hero killer, which stopped him from moving for a second. Using this second she swung her blade again, which got stopped by the killer but knocked his hand into the air. Izuku began running, intent to finish this fight, but quickly realized he couldn't make it in time. Stain began to bring his hand down, aiming right at Yaoyorozu's face. But was stopped by a flash of blue light that shot next to him and kicked him in the side. He was shot against a wall but grabbed onto something as he went. The light disappeared and they all saw Ida standing there. "I won, I will be a hero." Suddenly Yaoyorozu fell to the ground. "Yaoyorozu!" Izuku shouted while he looked at her. Ida turned to Stain and saw him holding the handle of his broken kanata. Izuku stood back up and turned to Stain. He held out his knife. "Ida. Let's end this." "Yeah." The fight ramped back up into high gear as the three fighters shot at each other. Ida shot forward past Izuku and attempted to kick Stain, but the latter of them dodged under the other's foot before raising his blade and giving a small and slight cut against Ida's calf. He lifted the blade up to his mouth and went to lick it, but got stopped as flames shot forward and scorched his tongue. Stain shot away from the two teens and into the air in an attempt to lick the blade. Ida shot after him. Izuku watched from the ground. "Do this. Come on." Yaoyorozu said as she lay on the ground. Win this Ida. They both shouted. Repsyro burst. Ida shouted as his leg began lighting up with blue flames shooting out of them. His leg slammed into Stain's ribcage, the sound of the bones breaking rung through Stain's ears. However, Stain managed to lick the blade before he succumbed to the pain dealt by the boy. He began sliding down the building and shot off to finally kill the paralyzed teen, but got stopped as another fist came flying at him from the side. The glowing fist of Izuku slammed into his chest, shooting him toward a different building. He impacted the wall and made a small crater the size of a hero killer. Izuku grabbed onto Ida and landed, making sure the teen wasn't hurt by the fall. He quickly placed him down on the ground. He turned toward where the hero killer impacted, his weapon drawn. However, there was no need to have it out anymore as he quickly realized the hero killer was knocked out. They won. Izuku let out a massive sigh as he realized he needed to find something to tie him up. After finding a frayed rope that someone threw away, Izuku bound Stain and sat down waiting for everyone to be freed from Stain's quirk. You guys okay? Another voice echoed through the alley, which caused Izuku to flinch for a second. He looked up and saw the pro-hero native. Izuku was kind of shocked. How did he find them and why was he bleeding? I watched that fight. I wanted to help but I couldn't move, sorry. Izuku didn't even realize he was here. He was far too focused on the fight to even register native. Though he did notice the set of eyes staring at him throughout the whole fight. Thank you. Izuku said when native dragged Stain away from him. Yaoyorozu slowly got up and ran over to Izuku before hugging him very tightly. We did it, we beat the hero killer. She had a childish glee in her voice, one that Izuku or anyone in their class had never heard before. After a few more minutes, Ida got up as well. They then quickly exited the alleyway, none of them wanting to stay there after that. They arrived on a side street that was desolate because of the time of night and the fire from earlier. Quickly a few more heroes rounded the corner and made their way over to the group. Move out of the way. A villain is on its way here right now. Huh. And sure enough, the flying Nomu Izuku had clashed with earlier flew around the corner. Just behind it was Ace, who was struggling to keep up with the speed of the flying beast. And behind her was Todoroki. They all questioned themselves on why Todoroki was here, but Izuku didn't get the chance as he was swooped up by the flying creature. His knife fell to the ground. Izuku, Yaoyorozu, Ida, and the now watching Todoroki shouted as they watched their friend be kidnapped by a pale white beast. Ace's glare intensified as she saw it grab onto her student, however, she still couldn't catch up with it. She came to a stop next to the others, the BLD of the Nomu on her sword. Sounds of rope falling filled their ears. Ida, Yaoyorozu and native all turned around to see Stain now free from his bindings. He ran past them while he licked the BLD on Ace's sword and grabbed Izuku's fallen dagger. The Nomu began falling. This world is full of fakes. He shouted as he ran forward and leapt into the air and stabbed the Nomu in the head, killing it instantly. The three began falling to the ground. Izuku braced for an impact that didn't come as Stain was grabbing onto him. But you are worthy of being a hero. So therefore I'm sorry. Huh. Stain began running off into an alleyway nearby to try and get away from the fakes. Ace, you're the only one fast enough to catch up with him. Another hero shouted as Yaoyorozu, Ida, and Todoroki ran over to Izuku. Aw! A scream filled the air. They all looked to Yaoyorozu, who was the one who let out the ear-piercing noise. He's been stabbed. Izuku looked down and saw the BLD rushing out of his body. It was now he realized why Stain said he was sorry. He quickly fell unconscious. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author ArgonautStrike on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.